Hi sinners, I'm Carmilla de Maurier, and welcome to my little corner of hell. Undoubtedly, my most popular video, with a couple hundred views, is my unboxing of a Richard Lehman collection. And I haven't really talked about Lehman, I think, at all since uploading that video. At times I consider Lehman a guilty pleasure, but I still do consider him among some of my favorite authors because I always have a great time reading his books. In that unboxing, I mentioned that I still had a couple more of his books to pick up before I had his complete collection. And I want to emphasize my goal has never been to own every single book he's ever written. He has some YA novels written under pen names, as well as at least one particular book, Once Upon a Halloween, that was only ever printed in a limited edition hardcover that I don't want to spend $300 for. And since making that video, I have acquired the two other mass market paperbacks that I was missing from his collection. All Hallows Eve, one of his earlier novels, and actually the next up chronologically for me to read, and Quake, which is one of his longest books. As you can see, it's quite chunky. I need to give a huge thank you to Juan at Plagued by Visions for sending me this copy of Quake. He recently unhauled a ton of books and was kind enough to send me this one since I had mentioned that it was the only one I didn't have. Thank you so much, Juan. You have completed my Richard Lehman collection for me. I'm sure you're so proud. It has always been my goal to own and read all of his mass market paperbacks, and I'm still pretty early on in that project. I think I've read about probably 6 or 7 at this point. There's something about the way he writes sex scenes and murder scenes that is just so heavy-handed and bad, but that's just so entertaining and endearing almost. I've said before that it feels like he writes like a horny, edgy 12-year-old, and that I think that that's kind of a valid voice from which to write. I do find it truly entertaining. This video is going to serve as a sort of introduction to an ongoing series that's going to be happening on my channel, where I will be periodically updating you with the Richard Lehman books that I've read lately. So today I have 2 to talk about that I've actually read. I'm going to shoot for talking about 3 to 4 books each video, depending on how quickly I'm getting through them, because I would like this to be a fairly regular series. Now, I am reading these in chronological order, but as you'll see today, I kind of cheated and I skipped ahead and read one that I was really dying to read. Jumping from reading only his earlier books to one that was more mid to late career, I can see a lot of development, honestly, in his writing style. I'll get into that as I talk about these books. So let's get into some delicious Lehman. Content warnings abound. There's always going to be some very nasty stuff happening in his books, and he often does deal with this stuff in a very insensitive way, let's say. So, with that started, let Project Lehman commence. The last Richard Lehman book I talked about on the channel was Out Are the Lights in my Reread, Rewrite, Reburn video. This was his 3rd novel, and I enjoyed it. It does follow a sort of snuff film plot. There's a movie theater that's playing horror double features, and in between the features is always this strange short film. So of course there ends up being this sort of underground ring of people making these films and passing them off as fiction, even though they are not. The primary character that we follow is deaf, and interestingly we don't find that out until quite late into the book. She lost her hearing later in life, so she can still read lips and converse without people really being able to tell, which probably not the best representation. I mean, Lehman is not particularly sensitive about anything, and oh boy was there some rough representation of a black character in this. So it was, I think, possibly one of his more problematic books, if that bothers you. It's kind of why I read him. It's half genuine enjoyment and half scorn, I think, that I approach a Richard Lehman novel with. And this one was pretty much a good half and half for that. And next I read Night Show, which is chronologically the next after Outer the Lights. And this book kind of functions as a sister novel to Outer the Lights. There isn't any overlap in terms of character or plot or even location, but this is also a book that's about horror films. It's very much a love letter to the making of 80s horror films, and particularly slashers. This follows a special effects wizard named Danny, who is maybe one of my favorite characters to appear in a Richard Lehman novel. She's quite a badass, although maybe a little gullible. She is a special effects wizard in horror films, widely regarded as the best of the best. And so she of course catches the attention of an 18-year-old incel, I think is certainly an apt term to describe him, who is a horror fan and has aspirations of becoming the best in special effects. He has this history of playing horrible pranks on people, and there's one person who he may have done this to who's out for revenge. So it does follow that typical Richard Lehman A-B plot, but I have to say I really enjoyed the story progression in this. It's almost like a Lifetime movie on the page. So it is very goofy, it's very paint by numbers, but that relationship between Danny and Tony, the prankster incel kid, I found the relationship actually quite interesting. What ends up happening is Danny becomes sort of a hesitant mentor to Tony. His obsession with her grows and becomes more and more frightening. And then all while this is happening, we have this revenge story going on in a different location that of course we know is leading to a meeting between the aggrieved party and Tony. You kind of assume that this is going to go in a very violent direction. And, you know, of course it does eventually. It is a Lehman novel, but how it does is something I'll leave for you to discover. And the way the stories come together, I found deliciously satisfying. It seems that people tend to prefer Outer the Lights to this. I actually thought this was a much more interesting book. I don't know if it was better per se, but I had much more fun with this than I did with Outer the Lights. I did find this more unpredictable, I think. There are a lot of scenes where you know that something's gonna go south, but you don't quite know when. It actually builds tension in a way that I find Lehman often is not very good at. If you look at like The Cellar and The Beast House, tension is non-existent in those books. Like literally the second people set foot in the house, they're getting chomped. This was actually an interesting departure where yes, he can weave together kind of an erotic suspense story that is punctuated by gratuitous graphic violence and oh yes, lots and lots of sex. Maybe it's just that I'm too empathetic for my own good, but I actually find it very easy to empathize with Tony, and he is the kind of person who plays on people's pity of him. But whether he is actually dangerous is always sort of amorphous, and you can't quite get a handle on whether this is somebody whose whims should be indulged, or if he might be capable of doing something really horrible. I'll leave it up to you whether he is or not, but it is a Lehman novel. Very suspenseful, occasionally quite funny, and a very Lehman read, and actually a highlight so far of his early work for me. Oh shit. And then now is the one that I jumped ahead quite a bit to read because A, I was just really excited to read it, and B, I read it on vacation in Italy on the coast, and it felt a very appropriate location to read this, so I kind of saved it for that. And it is, of course, Island. This is certainly one of the most talked about Richard Lehman novels. My copy did get, unfortunately, quite mangled in transit. I was traveling a lot, but it certainly came out better than my copy of She Wakes by Jack Ketchum, which I accidentally left on a train. I've since replaced it, don't worry. So this is either, it seems, one of your favorite Lehman novels or one of your least favorite Lehman novels. And the reason for that is down to the narrator. Island treats us to the diary of Rupert Conway, an 18-year-old incel. Are you seeing a pattern yet? He is on vacation on a yacht with his girlfriend who hates him and her very rich family. And when they have stopped on an island, their yacht blows up in literally the first paragraph of the book. And so this follows these castaways told from the perspective of Rupert, who is actually the only one who's not related to anyone on the island, which creates a very interesting dynamic. Of course, since Layman needs to get all the sexy stuff in, a true family vacation would maybe not suffice. So through Rupert's diary, we hear a lot about the women that he is on the island with, and whores. Sharing this island with Rupert and his horrible girlfriend are a couple members of her family, including 2 half-sisters and a MILF. And when I say MILF, I mean it. Shortly after being marooned on the island, one of their party turns up dead. And then another one. And they soon learn that there is someone on the island with them who is intent on picking them off, it seems. Now, this book was incredibly fun until it wasn't. A lot of people talk about the ending, and the last, I guess, 5th of this book. While there is, of course, all of this talk of women's bodies and Rupert's just inconsolable horniness, there's actually not very much in the way of the usual Layman stuff going on in terms of assault. It's more just pent-up horniness that's happening. And it's not just Rupert who's pent up and horny, I must say. That MILF is ready to go. As an aside, if you picture the character Billy in this book as Jennifer Coolidge, hi, I think you'll have an even more fun time. Now, towards the end is when all of that Layman stuff comes in, and it comes in hard. And it was very uncomfortable for me, but based on the way people talk about it, I expected it to be much worse and much more tasteless. There really is only one true scene. It's horrible, and even more horrible is the way Rupert talks about it. Where I'm gonna defend this book is, it is very clear that Layman knows that Rupert's not a great guy. So while he is the protagonist, I don't think it would be safe to call him a hero. Something else to note is that this book is over 500 pages. It's one of his chunkiest books, and I flew through it and was never once bored. It really moves along at a great pace, and I think to write a 500-page book that's this easy to digest and this fun to rip through is a feat. It's something I certainly couldn't do. And on the whole, I just really liked this book. I really liked how nasty it was willing to get towards the end, even if I didn't love the execution. And getting there was really a blast. I want more books and movies set on deserted islands. I really enjoyed Castaways by Brian Keane, which isn't terribly similar to this. That is sort of a more supernatural tale. This is not supernatural at all. It is a psycho killer on an island. If his idiosyncrasies when it comes to sexuality and everything surrounding that are what really put you off from a Layman book, this is not the one to pick up. This is definitely a great book for Layman fans who read him because of that juvenile, gleeful crossing of lines that probably shouldn't be crossed. So there is a little Layman twofer for you. I really enjoyed Night Show, and I'm just now realizing that I annotated something in this. I'm Carmilla du Maurier, the composer next door, and I'll see you in hell.